You wanted to empower parents. That's where it really begins, and that's where it ends.
0 to 5, 90% of the brain is being developed in relationship with primary caregiver. They're so focused on you in ways that you can't even comprehend. Chaotic and intense times are not fun, but if we are present and we're continuing to try to grow and learn through them with our children, we're giving them the gift of how to navigate that.
Cute, cuddly creatures paired with therapeutic intervention stories, positive core belief systems that impact the emotional and social health of children.
Welcome to the Foundations of Learning podcast. I hope to inspire you to actively participate in your child's learning journey, fostering a love for knowledge and nurturing the skills necessary for success in a rapidly changing world. I am excited to talk to you guys today about emotional learning because I do think it's something that I don't know. There's people that say like, oh, we shouldn't have that in schools. Some people say we should have it in schools. As being an educator myself, I taught first grade. I definitely feel like it was something that I had to learn on my own because we didn't have good social emotional learning programs, or it was just the school counselor that came in like once a month and did something with the kids. And a lot of it was, really like reward based or consequence based. And it wasn't really like fixing the deeper core issue that was going on. And so I want to dive in a little bit into your guys' backgrounds into education and family therapy that came together to start Slumberkins. So like, how did you guys meet? How did this all begin with, starting Slumberkins?
Yeah, Kelly and I met actually in high school. We've been best friends since we were 14.
Oh, that's awesome.
Did life in parallel as athletes, and then just Kelly we both played D1 college sports. And then Kelly played professionally overseas, and then I piggybacked on her pro career and found a team to also play with overseas. And then we both came back to the States and started our master's programs to become educators around the same time. So we kind of have always just done life together and in parallel. And it was really in 2015, we ended up on a maternity leave together that was a serendipitous maternity leave that kind of gave us this space because as a teacher, I was a special education teacher, but I worked in a day treatment school. So it's the most restrictive environment you can be in a public education setting before a child is placed in a residential facility for behavioral mental health concerns. So I was not only a teacher, I was also having to be a therapist without being a family therapist. So I would call Kelly all the time and say, okay, I have this student, like, tell me some strategies to use, or how would you approach this? And so we would swap interventions and strategies all the time. And then when we ended up on that maternity leave together and also being inspired by our new babies, it was this kind of aha moment of, wow, can we actually empower parents with therapeutic storylines and interventions in a really easy, turnkey, approachable, like almost stealthy way, because it's disguised as cute, cuddly creatures paired with therapeutic intervention stories that a family therapist would want a parent to say, that really kind of helps build these like positive core belief systems that impact the emotional and social health of children.
Yeah. And I would say too, just to like piggyback off of what you said about sort of the way that social emotional learning has been in the past and how kind of non-helpful and broken that system was. That was something that we recognized also I worked as a school counselor as well. And being the person who was supposed to be coming weekly. Often I wasn't able to get in weekly because there was some sort of crisis in the school. So I ended up coming like once a month and teaching lessons that felt very much more about controlling emotions and trying to get compliance for behavior management in the classroom, which as a dual licensed family therapist and school counselor, I didn't like. And I thought there's something missing from the depth that we're needing around how we're learning about emotions and how we're setting kids up for success from the earliest years all the way through school. And so really at the core of Slumberkins, we do focus on that depth of the core beliefs and how we use our emotions and the emotional learning that we start to get into with emotion identification and talking about feelings to understand ourselves better and the meaning that those emotions have for us.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely like what you're describing is what I experienced as an educator in the classroom. My last year teaching, we actually had a curriculum that was it was kind of decent, and we would teach it once a week, and then the counselor would come in once a month, and she would kind of do like a, I don't know, like a review of like all of the lessons that we were teaching. And a lot of it, was like, how do I solve a problem on the playground? We're talking about little first graders, right? Or like if we're feeling angry, how do we, come down from that anger to then, calm ourselves down? But a lot of it was really just like conflict resolution, if I'm being honest. Like that was like the biggest thing, which I mean, it's important to teach them conflict resolution because that's a big part of, what they're trying to do and learn, socially. But I wouldn't say it was really great on the emotional side of things. And so like, what do we do when we're feeling sad or angry or, like just really learning all of the emotions of happiness and joy and, all of the different emotions that they're going to feel, and how you can approach that and feel better and talk about it and all of that stuff. And I actually just incorporated, have you guys ever heard of the, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking out, something like the spot books, like the
Oh yeah, little spot of
feeling,
feeling.
yeah, little spot of feeling or whatever. And so I actually just got those books in my classroom and had the little
Right.
posters and stuff. And that's kind of how I had to incorporate it myself. And there wasn't really a curriculum to go over that, and I think it's so important, like you guys said, that you wanted to empower parents, because really that's where it really begins and that's where it ends, right? So like no matter what I did in the classroom, yeah, they learned some things, some coping mechanisms, things like that, but it wasn't really being implemented at home. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. And I think as adults too, you kind of have to have your own regulation and emotions and understand how to regulate those yourself. And I think as adults, a lot of us actually don't even have that. And so then kids will learn, right, how you react in certain situations, and then that's what they do. And so I think it's so important that we do start that conversation at home as well, because I mean, it really doesn't matter that much what I do, at school. I mean, it matters a little bit. And so let's talk a little bit about your framework that you guys have. What is your Connect to Grow framework, and what does it look like in daily life for families?
Yeah. So as we were building Slumberkins, I think we really wanted to implement sort of the theoretical background and training that we had from best practices in the classroom, as well as these deeper psychological and therapeutic concepts. So the framework that we used was really, first and foremost, that the relationship, like what you were just talking about, the primary relationships in a child's life are the ones where this learning is going to happen. And so it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not something that you can just say that, teach and not be actively a part of. So first and foremost, parents are the first teachers of that. And we call teachers kind of secondary primary caregivers, right? Like they're the ones that kids are transitioning to have those longer days with. And they do become more important for some kiddos who potentially have more difficult family lives and homes. Like the teacher does become that primary source of safety for some kids, as you probably well know. But for some kids, it's really that secondary. So first and foremost, that relationship is key. That kids do well and people do well when they can. Just believing in the inherent goodness in people and their striving towards growth and learning and pro-social behavior if they have the skills to do so. So really we don't align with like shame-based practices, right? Like I think in the education space and the parenting space in the past, we have used shame as a way to control behavior. And it was really widely accepted. And I think we are sort of the generation that experienced that and then saw the limitations because of the way it fell on us and sort of the long term effects of that. So, for example, feeling like somebody's telling you have to achieve, you have to get the best grades, you have to, do that, right? Like you think as a parent or as a teacher, you're supporting a child in doing that, but without leaving space to have space for failure, to have understanding of emotions in that, you can kind of develop a core belief around perfectionism and people pleasing, right? And then if you follow that down the line, like so many of us have, it leads to burnout, it leads to anxiety, it leads to depression, and we are wanting to give our children something more balanced. So There's a lot of tenets that go into Connect to Grow, but basically through the reflective practice of naming emotions, identifying them, understanding what messages those emotions have for you and your child, and exploring that together in relationship is really the basis of Connect to Grow. And it just becomes a practice that can happen at any time throughout the day. And we have the characters throughout the Slumberkins worlds that really help us hone in on specific sort of types of, emotions or setups of how somebody is. So like Hammerhead is for conflict resolution and anger and explosive kind of feelings, whereas our Bigfoot is about feeling left out, about self-esteem, about, worrying that you're not, you don't fit in, that kind of thing.
I love that. Do you have anything to add, Kaylee?
Yeah, I just would say like the Connect to Grow approach is really, there's so much depth built into it, but it's actually in practice very simple. It's spending 5 minutes of very intentional time with a child as their primary caregiver, really tuning in to what they're needing. And we use the power of affirmation to really like build that positive core belief system. I think for me as a parent, it was this like aha moment when Kelly would tell me as a therapist that internal voice that we're all thinking and hearing every day that's kind of talking to us or talking back to us in our head, that doesn't exist for kids. They're forming that internal narrative from the ages of 0 to 7. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we can really like impact our children so profoundly if we just proactively do this. So yes, affirmations are more mainstream, but like I truly believe if you put them into like a daily practice where you're in true connection with your children, that's how you build the strong foundation that we're talking about and that we all hope for our children.
Yeah, I think everything you guys just said is so important. And the aspect that we have with, the correlation to people pleasing and shame and, you have to do well on all of these tests and no room for failure is so heavily embedded in our school system. And I mean, I will say, like, obviously, I graduated college 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago. And there was a shift, and I could see it in the veteran teachers versus like us new teachers coming into the system, right? And the older teachers had like the behavior charts and like the clip charts, and like you have to go clip
Charts.
down.
Those are the
Yeah. Oh.
classic shame-based ones of like
Oh.
it's like the dunce cap. It was the modern dunce cap of like
Yes.
shame the kid, put them in the corner, and of course they're gonna. Well, some kids don't respond well to it. They just embrace it and say, "Okay, I'm the bad kid now," which
Mm-hmm.
is a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they're shamed into compliance, but they're like just locking away all of their, feelings and not actually getting to regulation.
Did you know that over 60% of US students fall below grade level in reading, and it often starts in the grades kindergarten through second grade? Don't let your child become a statistic. My Science of Reading Simplified course gives you a step-by-step tool to teach phonics, vocabulary, writing, and reading comprehension. If you want to equip your child to succeed, start today. Visit k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below to get started. Yeah, 100%. And like I saw that with kids, and even just like the way that the teacher perceived that child as well. Like the whole perception was just so different. And they'd be like, oh, it's this kid. Or even like, I mean, I taught first grade, so you'd have kindergarten teachers and they'd be like, oh, watch out for this kid. And so it's like putting that preconceived notion into your head that like, oh, okay, this kid's going to be really, really hard. And I tried to ignore that as an educator. And I was like, okay, I'm not even going to have that perceived notion. I'm going to find like, what are their great qualities, and like let's honor those, and let's try to like honor the child as a whole child, because a lot of schooling is compliance and they have to understand how to follow the rules. And I also get that as an educator because you have so many kids in your classroom, and so you kind of have to have this, it's like, I don't know, almost like a you're damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation, unfortunately. And so I think that it's important as educators to realize the certain, like what we are doing in our classrooms and the viewpoints that we have as well are shaping the kids. And you know, we don't want a bunch of people pleasers. We don't want kids feeling shame, and we don't want kids feeling like failing is the biggest end of the world so that we have a bunch of perfectionists. Like, it just leads to anxiety and different things down the road that we don't want. And so I think, what you guys are talking about, really understanding that, I think, is the first thing that we have to do as educators, as parents, so that we aren't continuing that cycle within the classroom. And I definitely did not do any sort of sticker charts or the little clip charts or anything like that. We just had, goals for like hard work and being kind to others and, the different things like that. And they could earn points, but it was something that they had like a little chart on their desk, and they were the ones that kept track, and I would give them a thumbs up or whatever. Right. And so we didn't lose points. We just gained points, and that was it. And if there was a behavior that needed to be fixed, it was like a one-on-one conversation between me and the child. Or if there was another child involved, we'd bring them in, and we'd have this conversation of like, hey, let's talk about it. Let's fix it. What were we feeling? How can we change it next time? Right. So I really tried hard to not have that shame aspect of it, and that it was like a very personal conversation that we would have together. And I think that's something too that parents can learn as well. Like, as I'm a new parent now, obviously I want more kids, and I'm going to have siblings, and there's going to be that same aspect of things that is going to be happening. And I think as parents, it's really important that we, like you guys said, we work on our inner dialogue, because your kids hear that. Even if you don't think they do, you subconsciously sometimes will say things out loud that is maybe not the best inner dialogue, and they start they start to catch on, right? And they're like, oh, okay, like this is whatever, this is the inner dialogue that I should have as well. And so I just think everything you guys are saying is so important, and the fact that you're working on it yourself, working on it with your child, you're having those conversations, it's an open conversation that you're having. And I think if you're both doing that, I think it's going to help. And unfortunately, like I said, the way that the system is set up is just kind of the way the system is set up. So if you can, help your child, like if you have a teacher that does a sticker chart or a clip chart, I don't think there's as many teachers doing it anymore. I've only seen a couple, and I've worked in a couple of schools, and I've only seen a couple of teachers actually doing that still. So I hope that's changing. But I think if you start at home, it's so helpful.
Yeah,
Yes,
I would
absolutely.
say,
I
yeah.
think what we've seen more recently, I guess so I'll use my daughter's class as an example. She's a third grader now, but in first grade, her class was going off the rails. It was like the band of age group of students that really missed the preschool years because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
socially, the class was just a perfect storm. And the thing that the school still really relied on was sending kids out of class. And because of power struggles that then would escalate, and then sending kids out. And that just became this pattern of, then of course going to the school counselor's office or the principal's office feels like they've escaped the chaos. And so I had to get very collaborative with the teacher and the school and the principal and the school counselor. And just, I remember having a meeting because my daughter's behavior was off the rails. The whole class was so dysregulated. And it came down to power struggle and lack of relationship between the teacher and the kids. And unfortunately, it was a year where the regular teacher was out on personal medical leave a couple times. She was struggling herself. So then there was a lot of change happening in that class, hence the chaos of no one was really in charge and really there to really build the relationship with kids. But yeah, that's more what I see as the sending the kids out of the classroom. Really, as the classroom teacher, you lose so much power in trying to build that relationship. But I also understand you have a job to do, and you have to get that classroom under control so that you can teach the kids.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's
think
such
it's
a weird. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's just also stepping back, whether it's a parent or a teacher, if you're authentic, really truthful with yourself, we're all gonna slip into coping
Mm-hmm.
because the level of overwhelm that we all experience as parents and then as teachers is incredible. So we have to understand and be true to our own dysregulation
Mm-hmm.
and use those moments as moments that you can authentically teach by being vulnerable and kind of narrating through how you're going to calm yourself down, how you're going to get back on track, how you would want that inner voice and dialogue to be happening for those kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And know that like moments like if you are using a clip chart, like you're reliant on that, like working towards maybe getting away from shame-based things, or as a parent, like you blow up sometimes. Like I don't know any parent that gets through the early years that doesn't yell or like blow up or have a moment where they don't show up in the way they want to. And the reality is that's how life is. Kids are
Mm-hmm.
going to experience that their whole lives, all through adulthood. So like the rough and chaotic and intense times they're not comfortable and they're not fun, but if we are present and we're continuing to try to grow and learn through them with our children, we're giving them the gift of how to navigate that, because it's never not going to happen. You're never going to
100%.
like get through school where you don't have a teacher that like maybe, goes out on medical leave, and then you have a long-term sub and you're just having a rough year,
Mm-hmm.
and like letting it be okay that like you may have to cope through sometimes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
something might happen in your family where you don't get to show up as the best parent that you want to be because you're grief stricken, or you have something going on at work and you just can't be the mom that you want to be. And like just being honest and like authentic about that, and allowing your family or like kids to witness and see how you're dealing with that in the most healthy way that you can, is like that's the goal. It's not doing it perfectly, it's being authentic about what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think it's so important to model when you have hard days, to model, stepping back and be like, you know what? I'm really sorry. I should not have handled that situation, and like apologizing to the kids because they are little humans, right? And I think that's one thing that I notice, just not in all educators, but just, we try to be perfect all of the time. And then when we're not perfect, it's like we are like, oh my gosh, I was terrible. But we never like sit down and say, I'm really sorry, guys. Like, I handled that so poorly. This is how I could have handled it differently. And just them seeing that and seeing it modeled, they're like, oh, like it's okay if I do make a mistake, if I, get angry and I hit a kid, or I, do something that I shouldn't have done. It's okay because I can apologize, we can move on, and I can change my behavior, right? And my last year of teaching was so rough. Like as you were talking, Kaylee, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like my last year before I left to, just be mom, because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was so, so hard. I had a really, really hard child in my classroom that had, you would know as a special educator, he had all kinds of different things that he was, going to special education classes, probably 2 hours of the day. He was in a different type of situation in kindergarten where he was like in a special education classroom for like half the day, and then a normal classroom for half the day, and he had an aide. And then in first grade they were just like, no aides whatsoever, we're just going to throw him into gen ed. And it was really, really, really hard, and I had to evacuate my classroom a lot. And so my kids had like these little, like, I don't know, I called them their briefcase, learning briefcases, and they had their whiteboard, their marker, their eraser, they had their notebook, like everything they needed so that I could, and they knew which teacher they had to go to. And it was like, hey, and I would just say, it's time to go to our other class. And they just knew. They would get their little briefcase with all their stuff, close it, and just walk to the other classroom that they needed to go to. And the teachers were awesome. I am so grateful for my team teachers because they just kept on learning just like as it would be normal, so that I could get my classroom under control with my one child, and then they would come back in when I was ready. And it was so, so hard. And I had days where I literally was just like bawling. And my students were like, what's wrong? I'm like, it's okay. We're just going to do some yoga and some breathing for a minute. And it was because I needed it. Like it was just like one
Yes.
of those days. And then after we were done, I was like, I'm so sorry I cried. I'm just having a really, really hard day. And I was feeling a lot of emotions. And that's why we did some yoga and some breath work, because Mrs. Flint needed it. And now I feel better. And maybe the whole class feels better. Now let's do the phonics lesson. And it was like, I just stopped because I was like, I'm at a boiling point. I'm about to lose it. And if I did lose it, I mean, there were times where I was like, everyone just stop. Like, it's just so much.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have yelled, and that was not okay. But I really need us to calm down. Like, I tried so hard as an educator to model that and to apologize when I was in the wrong, or to even show them that, like, I'm having a hard day. And I feel like at the end of that year, like, I was the very closest with those students because of what we went through together. And so when they had a hard day, like, they, would come to me and they would tell me, like, I'm having a really hard day and I need help. Or it was so cute. This one little girl, one of the times that I was just like at my desk, like, I just need a minute, she came over and she gave me a hug and she's like, can I help you? And I'm like, no, you can't. But that hug was so sweet. Thank you. And so it was
Oh
just
my
a really
gosh.
hard year. And like, the kids really stepped up. And when I was having a hard day, they'd be like, guys, Mrs. Flint is having a hard day. Let's do our best to whatever. Or, I don't know, so and so is having a hard day. Let's like do something nice for him at recess. Like, it was really this community that came out of something that was just so, so hard for that year. And they would like help their little friend, right? They'd be like, oh, they could even see when he's starting to, get to a point where he's getting overwhelmed and feeling, and they're like, you can do it. And they would like cheer for him. So it was like this whole thing where it was really hard and it sucked so, so bad. But
Yeah.
also, I feel like as a community, we came together and they felt recognized as like just humans, and not just like, oh, I go to school, I have to get my work done. Like, it was a community.
Yeah, that's so, I mean, as hard as that was, what a gift it was for
Yeah.
you to show up that way for that student and that whole class because, it sounds like you really built a community off of authenticity. And
Yeah.
like that's
Mm-hmm.
where like everyone feels the safest in relationship when there's authenticity. So
Mm-hmm.
what a gift. And it sounds like the school
Yeah.
system really, failed
Well,
the
this is
child from like giving the supports needed and so failed you too and the
yeah.
class in like giving the right supports because that's really difficult to go from having like a structure and support one-on-one support to then like not.
Oh
That's
yeah, and I
really
fought so hard. I fought so hard for this little kiddo, and my principal, he really
yeah.
was. He was working so hard. Like, he was trying to help me, but it was just kind of like, how the school system is, and with like the
Yeah.
bureaucracy of it all, and it's like this top down approach, and then you're like trying to talk to the head of the sped department, and then you're talking to the elementary director, and you're talking to like, and the principal's trying to find somebody to help you. And I mean, he found a college student that would like come in, for a few hours a day to try to do the one-on-one stuff. But I had a great relationship with this kid by middle of year, that it was
Yeah.
like he didn't care about the college student, even though she was trying so, so hard, and it wasn't her fault. And so then it was kind of like, hey, guess what, you get to be teacher. And I would just hand her my iPad and be like, I always made sure my lessons were just like written out so that I could just hand it to her, and then I was the one that would work with it. Like, it was a whole thing. And then they would quit because they were like, this is really hard, I don't know what to do. And so it was like this brutal cycle, and my principal was trying so hard.
Oh,
But yeah, it was definitely a gift, and it was really hard all at the same time. But I
I
feel
have
like
to
it kind of
say,
prepared me for like parenthood. I don't know. That's kind of what I was looking at
that's
it as.
I have to say, like, I just, those stories are just so, I mean, you're speaking the exact situations that I lived every day, 10 years ago, and it's still going on. It's getting more intense. And I just think about, when we created Slumberkins, we were seeing this issue, the same issues, and wanting to support more systemically around how we support with mental and emotional and behavioral health. And again, I just agree with Kaylee. Like, I heard this quote one time that like people think like the highest vibrational emotion, like the emotion that people are most attracted to is love, but actually it's authenticity.
Hmm.
Authenticity is like the highest vibration. It like brings people together. It opens people's hearts, and like as much as we want to like pretend or say, schools should be this way or teachers should teach this way, like you have to be present in the moment of what's actually happening and like work from there, and like you did, create community. And it is not easy. Like the school systems are really tough, and the amount of teachers that are turning over and not going into the profession and leaving early, it's getting more and more and more intense and compressed because of lack of funding, lack of resources, all of these things. And it's like getting to a breaking point that I'm it's very worrisome. But at the end of the day, again, like looking at it from a human perspective of like, okay, but this is the reality. Like my kids go to a Title I school. Like my kids are in public education. What are the benefits, and like what are the ways that we can help prepare them for a life? Because really it's not necessarily about like subject learning. Of course I want them to learn and be as smart as they can and learn the skills, right? But at the end of the day, I want them to come out of school able to navigate the world and feel like they can do it. And I think even in tough situations, even in moments like this, when teachers can do what you did, although it sounds like it burned you out and like you had to
Yeah,
move in.
that was like my last. Yeah, it burnt me out mostly because I was like, okay, I want to have a family of my own. And
Yeah,
I knew that I actually told my principal, I was like, I'll work one more year because I was like planning on getting pregnant that like
yeah,
next year. And so I was like, I will work one more year if you can promise me that it will not be as hard as it was last year. And he was like, he looked at me, he's like, I can't promise you that because of the kids that are coming into your year next year. And I honestly am so glad that I quit and I subbed for my team teachers a lot. And I was like, you guys, I am so sorry. Like it's not because of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you have these terrible kids. It was just like,
no,
I don't even know. Like I asked so many veteran teachers, I was like, what do you guys think is happening? Like, was it this bad 10 years ago? Was it this bad even 5 years ago? And they were like, no.
no,
I
it's getting
like it's
progressively
getting
worse and worse.
yes, and I
But
like
that's the answer. Like even 10 years ago,
10 years
that was
ago, that's
the
what they were
answer.
saying
It just keeps
every
compounding
year.
worse and worse.
like what do you because I am like asking these veteran teachers like what is the problem? I'm like, is it technology? Is it I mean, and I'm working in an elementary school, right? And I'm looking at these kindergartners and first graders that even they have really hard behaviors. And it's and it wouldn't even be that like, oh, okay, I had some autistic kids in my class. I worked in Title I, so I did have a lot of kids that were coming to school that had unfortunately some trauma. They had maybe harder lives than some of the other kids because it was kind of a mix. But it was like what is going on? And there was teachers that had worked at this school for 15, 20 years, and they're like, no, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So I guess my question to you guys is like, what do you guys think is causing these problems?
Yeah. I mean, it's multi-layered, I believe. And I think the world at large, you can see it's all just a manifestation of what's going on internally for us. And I think technology is playing a huge role in that. And I'm happy that there was some traction from the anxious generation and people understanding the research around how technology is disrupting the attachment relationship, which is how kids are learning emotional regulation. Like I said, Slumberkins is based on that relationship, and that's based in attachment. So from 0 to 7, 0 to 5, 90% of the brain is being developed in relationship with primary caregiver, right? Like they're soaking up the information. They're so focused on you in ways that you can't even comprehend. And when we are disconnected and coping by looking at our phones and or giving them screens to like handle the emotional regulation or just distraction piece, which has become an addiction for us, like it's been so helpful. There's beautiful things about technology, and specifically when it comes to parenting and children, like there's an issue there, and we're seeing those effects, I think. Um, but again, I think that we're going to start shifting back and understanding that that's been a misstep. And it doesn't mean that kids are messed up or people who have experienced that have like missed a window. It just means that the kind of things that like we're teaching through Slumberkins about safe relationships, about expressing and feeling your feelings, like are going to be very, very important for those kids and those people, right? To go back and to feel and experience together. And it's not going to feel comfortable. It's going to be like the year you experienced, right? Like when you actually strip away that we have to go through hard things and we have to feel those feelings and we can't escape that there are people in our circle that are like in really bad places, right? Like where
Mm-hmm.
they cannot regulate. They're getting dangerous. They're being unsafe, right? Like you can't just lock people away. Like you can, I mean, we do, right? But like the more we do that, the more we're like just polarizing things. And it's actually through connection and belonging and acceptance and, you know, being part of the group that's going to bring people back together in a way that we can move forward together. So I do think that we're coming into some really scary times with like the way that the funding is being cut even more now. Can you imagine, from special education and all of these things, and the expectations of teachers and of you know, people working in the schools to really support kids who are not getting those skills, and parents who want to be supporting their kids probably have information overload from being on technology, but that exact thing is pulling them away from like the moments and connection points that are going to make the difference for their kids. Like we're just in a really intense moment. And I think, you know, personally, I think we're going to see some breaking down of that system, but the opportunity of that we have in those moments is to again accept authentically what's going on and come together, and not like, you know, so many teachers, I think it's just easy to like blame somebody or to make somebody the reason why everything is wrong, right? Like a lot of people might be like, well, it's that kid's fault. Like if that kid was gone, my year would have been better. Everybody would have been safe. It would be fine, you know? But like when we forget one child, when we forget one, I'll get emotional thinking about it. Like those are the kids that we worked with, and they were like ruined, like felt like they were horrible people and like just on the pipeline to, you know, horrible lives. Like what are we doing if we're doing that, you know? Sorry, I'm like
No,
really.
it's totally, I think it's, you're getting emotional because it's true. And that's, I mean, that's why I fought so hard for not only that my little guy. He was like I feel like those students are always the ones, not that all my other students don't have a place in my heart, but like I remember them. Like they are so memorable, and they usually are the ones that hated me in the beginning
Oh yeah.
because I was strict, but it was because I was trying to create a safe space where they knew what was going to happen every day. So we like had consistency, we had that schedule, and they knew what my expectations were, and I expected them to reach those expectations. Like not
Yeah.
just academically, like we're talking just like how we act, you know,
Yep.
in our daily lives and how we interact with each other and things like that. And so I like had really high expectations, and it was funny. Those kids would always, you know, they always hated me at first. They always told me like, I hate you. And they would like scream at me. And I'm like, that's okay if you hate me right now, but guess what? I'm so excited you're here today. Like I would just like, whatever, like I'm not gonna, you know, I would tell them how much I love them and that I'm excited they're here and whatever. And I really tried to build that relationship. And like you said, they start to they understand at a very young age that they're like, oh, I'm that kid. And then they
Yeah.
kind of
Oh,
give up, right? And those kids would bring me, like, it was so sweet. They'd bring me like flowers that they would pick as they were like walking to school, or they'd like bring me a rock that's like their favorite rock, and I'm like, that's so sweet. And I would just keep it on my desk. And you know, and something you said too about like if they're just ruined, right? They feel like they are ruined, and they continue that on year after year after year. And one thing that really worked with my little friend was that that's how he felt like as a first grader. You know, we had a little tracker that he did because that's what I was told to do. I had the behavioral specialist, the special ed
yeah.
teacher, you know, like everyone, the counselor, everyone was trying to work with me to try to help this little friend. And we wanted to make sure that he wasn't forgotten, and that also the other kids weren't forgotten, right? Like it's this weird thing that you had to try to balance. And he had a tracker, and the way that it was working for a minute was that it was like the full day. And by lunchtime, sometimes he was not on track to like meet what he was supposed to do at the end of the day. And I just started telling him, I was like, you know what? We're just going to do it by blocks. I'm like, we're going to do like a 2-hour window here. And then if you aren't winning by that end of that winning, whatever, right? Like if you had some mishaps, we're just going to start over. And I would just
Yeah.
start over his tracker. And I'm like, it's fresh,
Yeah.
it's new. We're going to start over. Because if he had in his head that I'm not going to meet my expectation by the end of the
Yeah,
day,
then it's kind of,
whole day
what's
was
the
done.
point?
What's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, we're just going to start over. It's a fresh new block. Let's start again. And I would just like erase his tracker. And I'm like, we're starting new. And he would look at me like, oh my gosh, I have another chance.
Like,
Yeah.
What
Like
a connection point, though. Like, to allow him to feel you always have a chance to start fresh. You always have a chance with me. I'm always going to believe that you can get there. And
Yeah.
that kind of love and support is what breaks those cycles for children. And like, I think as teachers, we're so, we're, you know, like the best teachers do that and naturally, instinctually, you know, and make such a huge difference for kids. And I think, you know, going back to parents, you know, like we all, I think when we become parents, we hope and like want to pour that kind of thing into our own children as well. And it can be very, very, very difficult. Like as a teacher, you have like a little bit of distance to be like, I can give that to a child. When it's your own child and you're in deep with behaviors or difficulties, like, man, talk about getting into the darkness and depths within yourself, because it will trigger your own stuff and your like family generational trauma and history. And even if you've learned the right things to do and like that, you know, you should be trying to be like that with your own child, it is really tough to do. And I experienced that as a therapist, like knowing the kind of like environment that I wanted to set up for my kids and how I would want to be with them. And, you know, realizing once I had kids that actually I was showing up as like not the best version of myself that I had imagined or wanted to be, and like felt really put back into this place of like, okay, everybody starts at the same place as a parent. Like you can have an idea, you could be an amazing teacher, you could be an amazing therapist, and then you have your child and like, guess what? You're at ground zero with everybody else getting triggered by your most like your blind spots, and you love your kid and you start leaning on those things that are like, you know, yelling at your child or shame-based stuff that your parents did with you and this kind of thing. So it's like across the board, whether it's in the schools or in parenting, I think we're constantly in this place of like, you know, challenge and growth. So it's like a beautiful opportunity for how we can continue to show up and work with our kids in these areas. And also just like really wanting to bring that in of like, there is no perfect, nobody, even like the top therapists and people who great teachers, like nobody's doing it perfectly or right all the time.
Help your child become a confident reader with letters and sounds. This structured curriculum includes lesson plans, games, and multisensory activities to make learning letters fun and effective. Get started today at k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below. No, and I think we have this idea too that like if I do it wrong once, like my kids are forever ruined, right? Like now there's no return from what, you know, I did. And I think it's important to remember that like that's not true. And sometimes like I have my daughter is 7 months old, okay? And I am just barely in the depths of motherhood here. And there are days where even like with a 7-month-old, I'm telling my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I screwed up or whatever. Or it's like 10 a.m. in the morning, right? My daughter gets up at like 5:30, so it's like we're up. It's been a day by the time it's 10 a.m. Like we've lived multiple lives, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, like it's so hard, or I did this, and I whatever, and my husband's like, it's 10 a.m. Like it's fine. Like the day's not even over. Like you can just like change your thought process or however you're feeling or whatever, and we can change it. And so I bless my husband for that, because I feel like being a new mother, like there's so many emotions that you feel, and then you're like, hoping that you're doing everything right. And it's a lot. It really is. And it's so different than being an educator, being the parent to this child, and it's 24/7. It's not just like, okay, I go to school, I know I can get through this school day, and then you go home. Like it's 24/7. And so I do think it is so much harder to do these things as a parent as well. And I do kind of want to get into like what you would say to parents who do feel like overwhelmed by the, emotional development or fear of doing it wrong. Like, how does Slumberkins help them through that?
Well, Slumberkins in general helps with that because the books are all the therapeutic tools and scripts that Kelly, as a family therapist, would want parents to say to build certain skills. So, and every book ends in an interactive affirmation routine, which is probably the most powerful part of experiencing Slumberkins, when your child is saying those things. Like, for example, the Bigfoot affirmation is, I am kind, I am strong, I am brave and unique. The world is better because I am here. I like me. And so when you're repeating that and you hear your 3-year-old repeat that back to you, and you're doing that like nightly at your bedtime routine, building those skills is just so important. So that's how Slumberkins can be like a plug and play way to just reinforce a lot of those positive core beliefs that then lead to things like self-esteem, mindfulness. We do have creatures that are more like situational. So we have a hammerhead that helps with feelings of mad and anger and conflict resolution. So, and then we have another creature, alpaca, that helps with anxiety. We even have a creature for grief and loss. So we definitely have these like characters that really hone in on different situations or themes that you're wanting to implement as a parent. And Slumberkin just helps parents facilitate this type of practice in a very proactive way. And this goes back to even why we started Slumberkins, was to really like give the parents the words, because I'll take it back to the question of like, why is the classroom getting worse and worse and worse from behavior and mental health perspective? Like, and I'll use my daughter as an example again. I really think like, yes, kids are dysregulated because of lack of connection at home and the increase of time on screens, like just the dopamine, like addiction to the screens, like kids are so dysregulated. And I don't know that parents are comfortable in like the emotional like attunement and like work that needs to be done on their end to really foster emotional awareness, emotional
Well, we
literacy.
didn't have it.
Because we didn't receive it as kids ourselves. Because our parents, it's not that our parents did anything wrong. They didn't know anything about like emotional health, and like, the vast majority, some people probably did, but I would say our generation, like, we're having to learn these emotional skills for the first time ourselves. And I think for a lot of parents, if their child is having behavior issues or mental health challenges, a lot of times they ask like, well, what's the teacher doing? Like, or what's going on at school? That's not happening at home, because at home they're like coping on devices because parents are overwhelmed. So of course they're not seeing the type of behaviors when their kids are being asked to do things they don't want to do, and they're being held accountable for behavior choices. So when my daughter was a part of that class that was going off the rails behaviorally, she was one of the kids that I am a special ed teacher that came from a therapeutic day treatment behavior program. So I had to put away my own embarrassment and shame that my child was one of the ones that was, in the most extreme version of what happened in that classroom. She was the child in the middle of the room holding a chair above her head, because she was like, and I had to be like, I had to step in and team with the teachers in a way that like parents don't know how to do. And then I also took it on my own responsibility and accountability to start family therapy with her, but like most parents won't know or won't like do that, but then like the amount of work that it takes on the parent side to really support a child that's in crisis and so dysregulated, like
Because
that's
you
like
could have easily
huge.
had a shame reaction to that, to
Yeah.
say, I own Slumberkins. I'm supposed to be teaching emotional regulation. I'm a special ed teacher, and now my child is like the reactivity of like not staying in authenticity, of like staying, okay, this is happening, and how do I support, and wanting to like defend against that and be like, no, and like push it away, is just such a normal reaction, right? Like, it's a human reaction. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot to like breathe through that and to say, okay, this is really what's happening, and how would I want to show up and support these skills and like get through it? And like
Yeah.
Haley and I have each other, and like, in those moments, like we both support each other through that. So like having your community of people that help remind you how to get to that place is really important. that don't fuel the fire of like, yeah, it's the school, or, you know, like that get into the place where you can problem solve and like really get to the heart of it, I think is so important. It's like coming back to that middle ground where there isn't a black and white answer
Yeah.
for anything.
Well, and just like the learning. So we went through family therapy for a few months and we were very consistent with it, and it was play therapy. It wasn't sitting there and talking about any of the behaviors. It wasn't talking. It was just a play therapist facilitating boundary setting practices and also connection based practices through play. And I was shocked, like, so over time she was more regulated because she was getting very focused, consolidated time and attention and like attunement from me. So then she felt more safe and grounded in her own self. And guess what? The behaviors completely subsided. Second grade, she was like star of her class, leader, most behaved, like just, she also had a teacher that wouldn't power struggle and just kind of positioned her. Like, so there's so many nuances to her situation, but like every student situation. But I just think that like the 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 both sides of like the missed like parent child school connection, like there's such a disconnect there. And until like there is a way to kind of wrap around and like connect all the things through parent, like student, parent, school, like
Regulation, right? Like
mhm.
I just see that key point. Like any person, and any person who can come in a regulated state, like you did for your student, right? That was like getting overwhelmed and starting to freak out because he was going to miss his marks, right? Like you lended him your regulation and said, "No, we got it. We're going to calm down and we're just going to restart," right?
Mm-hmm.
Your husband did that for you when
Mm-hmm.
you started to freak out about your daughter, because of course you're going to. Of course you're going to get into a dysregulated state, and we need other people to lend us their regulation even as adults, right? Like, so that happens through community, through our connections, our support network. And when one person shows up and can give it to another, it spreads. And so it's like, how do we get to that place where we don't get pulled into the chaos and the dysregulation, which adds to that chaos that just spreads, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we bring that regulation one person at a time and spread it in that way and create, even in chaos, create the kind of environment that you created that last year that you did. And yeah, it was probably a really heavy burden to be the one person in the classroom for 25 kids lending your regulation, and that isn't supported enough, and you needed team teachers, you needed probably more aides and people coming in and giving you that. But the more people that come, the more that can spread and create environments where people get to show up and actually do that learning and bring their gifts to the world.
Yeah. And it really is so important. Like, if you are an educator, you know, that you have, because the whole school like knew like that this was just like, it was a really hard year for me. And I would even like at lunch, sometimes I would just be sitting there and I would just like have my eyes closed and I would just be eating my lunch. And they're like, all the teachers, like fifth grade teacher, like it didn't matter. The, you know, secretary, whatever, they're like, what can I do to help you in this moment? You know? And so just having, like you said, somebody there that could be the regulation for a minute, because I had to be that regulation for all 25 kids, you know, and all of these kids had different things that were happening. And there were some days where it was like 5 kids all at once. And it was like, whew, it's a lot, you know? So it's a lot to try to stay calm yourself, be the one that's like in the regulatory state. I did a lot of just like deep breaths throughout the day. Like, I can do this. And I do think it's important, like you said, Kaylee, that, you know, you became that anchor for your daughter as well, that she knew that there was somebody that's like, you know, going to be that regulation for her. Even if she maybe didn't have it at school, she knew like she had different coping mechanisms, probably, I'm assuming as well, right? For when she was feeling overwhelmed, because all of us have a breaking point. And, you know, we expect so much of these little kindergartners and first graders and second graders to be so regulated, when even as adults, like, we can't do that all of the time, but we expect them to be regulated all of the time. And, you know, with the school system, we are, you know, I feel a little bit that we are kind of, not that we're like creating these behaviors because they've gotten worse, but like the fact that these littles need so much more playtime than they're getting, like over the years, we've also like, expected so much of them academically, and there is a lot of pressure on educators as well with test scores and making sure that all of these kids are getting to a certain point when it's literally impossible, even if you're using the very best strategies, to get every single one of these children to where they need to be. Because learning is not just like, okay, I'm going to teach you the skill and you're going to master it. If they don't have like emotional regulation and there's something going on, they completely miss that lesson. If they have something going on at home, they completely miss that lesson. If they're, whatever it is, like, it's not as simple as just teaching them a skill and moving on. Like, that regulation piece and that emotional or social emotional piece, it is important, because if we're, in our monkey brains because we're feeling all of these emotions, then they're not in their logical brain and they can't learn anymore. And so it really is so complex. And I really I don't know, I really, really hope that the education system does kind of reform in that we change. I hope that we have lower class sizes. I hope that we integrate more play for these littles, because it's so, so important for them. And that's really, like, I noticed even with my students, like, there were times where I just say, you know what, you need more playtime. We're just going to play. I don't care. We're going to set a timer for 15 minutes. I would get all of the blocks out. I would let them, whatever they wanted to do. If they wanted to color, if they wanted to read, if they wanted to play. I had like little dramatic play stuff in my first grade classroom, which we didn't use often, but we did sometimes. We would just play. And the reset that had and the regulation that it had, because like you said, with connection, like, they were able to connect with their peers, they were able to talk with their peers, they could talk to me, they could read a book, like whatever helped them regulate, and just getting that play out. And then we would do a lesson. So it was like, I just think that a lot of it too is how we have things structured, and I wish it was different. And I have hope that there's change happening in our system to hopefully, honor the whole child, to honor where they're at developmentally. And hopefully we can, like, instead of, just cramming academics down their throat as much as we can, because like you said, it's important. They need to learn how to read. They need to know how to write, do math, things like that. But one of the most important things is how to be a human in our society, how to connect, how to have relationships, and how to, really just thrive in our world. And I think that we kind of miss that point a lot. And even as parents, right? Like, I think about even my sisters, they have older kids, obviously, than I do, because they're older than me. And so, their kids are in all these extracurriculars, and then they've got homework, and then they have school. And it's like, even as a parent, like, I can't even imagine how stressful that is and like, they work. So then it's like, you're going to work, your kids are going to school, you're coming home, you're running them to extracurriculars, trying to get dinner ready, trying to do laundry, trying to keep the house clean, like whatever it is. And then having that time to also like work on social emotional stuff and, work on that yourself, work on it with the kids. Like, I would just imagine that it's like so exhausting by the end of the day.
It is. And I would say too, though, like, we can shift the way we think about social emotional learning, because it's happening constantly. It's
Mm-hmm.
happening on the way to extracurriculars. It's happening during dinner. It's happening in relationship through your connection, your conversations, your body language, everything, right? Like, the way that we see the world and the way that we interact in the world is what is happening. It's like in relationship, it's happening. So there are so many little ways to infuse emotional awareness and learning and growth in your everyday just things that are going on, because that is the reality of being a parent, right? Like, in this world and this society, like, we are, Kaylee and I are both single moms. Like, we work, we are run into extracurriculars, we're doing all of these things. And it's that authenticity, right? Like, it's being real and with who you are, with your emotional state, with talking through regulation, with noticing and making space for emotions in your conversations with your kids, bringing it forward, and not having to fix or change anything about emotions. It's like curiosity about emotions and what that means for you. Because when you understand that emotions are messengers of deeper needs or beliefs of the person that they're coming from, it doesn't mean anything outside of you has to change. But when somebody gives that space and witnesses that or validates that, and with kids, their language is play. So if your child can't like speak yet, they can play for sure. And that's where they're doing this. So like witnessing, watching them play and being present with them through play is like the way you do this for younger kids, but for older kids, right? Like making space like that, you can do that throughout your day. And like, I'm so glad you did that for your kids in your classroom because it's like intuitively you knew, right? Like similar to adults, like if they're off, like everybody's upset, like nobody's able to like, there's like just bad vibes. Like you probably need to just pause and like talk it out and like
Mm-hmm.
address the issue for whoever or whatever's going on. And as adults, we're so in our heads and that becomes stories and talking, and kids don't have that capacity. So what they need is play, and they work through it themselves, right? Like they play it out with dramatic play. They run and they move through their emotions, and then they're ready to get back to a place of like connection and learning. So just you're obviously it's an amazing teacher and really gave that to your students and intuitively knew that. And so I just wanted to highlight it because I think it doesn't come as intuitively for people who haven't maybe experienced it themselves, but there's so many ways to like integrate that into your life as a parent or as a teacher.
100%. And I think the reason that a lot of teachers don't do this is because, like I told you, there's a lot of pressure. And I mean, I'm sure Kaylee understands this as well. There is a lot of pressure on you to get these certain, like, test scores. And then to, some schools are really strict and they're like, you must be doing phonics at 10 a.m. And so, like, if you're off on that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm going to get in trouble. And I think I've just always been kind of a little rebellious as my whole life. You can even ask my parents. Like, I was just kind of that rebellious child. I don't like rules or being told what to do. I was very hard as a child. I was the quote unquote hard kid. But I think it's because we feel like we're going to get in trouble, and it goes back to this people pleasing thing, that shame thing. Like, it's like this cycle that just keeps on repeating over and over. And I was like, I don't even care. If I get in trouble, it is what it is. You can come get mad at me for letting kids play. I don't know. Like, that's going to be a silly thing, and everyone's going to look silly besides me because they just needed play, and it's fine. And we will get to the lesson. And really, it's funny because that last year I had the lowest class that I've ever had academically, and I had the hardest class, and my class was way lower than the rest of the classes. And somehow, even with us having all the things, the distractions and the evacuations and the time where we would just stop and do breath work or yoga or play or whatever, somehow my kids ended up like scoring higher than even the other classes. And I was like,
I'm not surprised.
I'm like,
I'm not
how?
surprised at
How
all.
did this happen?
That's what happened.
But I think it was because of, now as I can look back and I'm like, oh, it's probably because we had time to actually regulate. Whereas like the other teachers were like, we have to get through this. Let's go, let's go, let's go, and it was just like, you know what? We're done for 15 minutes. We're done. And I think that teachers need to just a little bit kind of step back and say, it's fine. I'm not going to get in trouble. And then even as a parent, give yourself grace. Like my husband tried, he's the one that gave me the grace. Like, it's okay. Yeah. We're having a really hard day, and our daughter, she's actually kind of sick right now. She's got a little bit of like a virus right now. And so it's like, they're a little more fussy, and then it's just 24/7. And then you're like exhausted. And then you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, and then you feel bad for even thinking that. And then, it's like this thing. So I think that, as a teacher, don't be scared to get in trouble. Like, whatever. Like, honestly, it's fine. If you feel that's what's best right at that second, do it. As a parent, same thing. Like you said, if you think this is what we need to do right now, even if it's pausing and it's like, I don't know, maybe you're going to be 2 minutes late to your extracurricular because we are having a big thing, and I'm not just going to drop you off and just say whatever. Like, maybe we have to stop for that second and say, okay, let's work on it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so beautiful. It's full circle because what you're teaching your children and what you're teaching your children in the schools is this self-leadership and ability to not just listen to somebody else and do what they say because that's the right thing to do, right? Like that's what we're trying to help parents cultivate with their own children. We as Slumberkins are like, we know you are, we want you to be the expert on your child and to tune in. We're not going to be able to give you the answers all the time of like what you should be doing or not. Like tune into yourself, find that place, like what is it for you in this moment, what is authentically true for you and your family, and like do that and be empowered in that. And teachers should be doing the same thing because they're giving those same skills that a parent is giving, especially in the early years of teaching. And so yeah, I just see that full circle of like you're doing the same thing as a parent that you're kind of doing as a teacher. Teachers have that extra layer of, expectations, but again, like striving towards the goals of like where you think you want to go, having a vision of that, right? Like we want to hit those scores because that means we get more funding and more support, and of course we desperately need that, but like not making it the be all end all, right? Like keeping relationship and keeping that regulation and support of humans, real humans in the moment is the most important thing, whether you're a parent or a teacher. And, it's so simple and yet so difficult at the same time.
100%. So I do want to kind of bring this all together here because I mean we've talked about a lot of stuff I feel like in this podcast so far, but I want to try to kind of boil it down for parents to make it very simple so that it doesn't, because like we've been talking about this whole time, I feel like our main theme here has been like we all get overwhelmed, we all feel like it's really complicated, and sometimes it can feel really really complicated, and maybe it's really not that complicated. So what is one simple thing that parents can do to start nurturing that emotional wellness at home?
I think for us, we know that parents typically are spending the most connected moments with their kids already in the bedtime routine. So for us, it's just making the bedtime routine even more connected and intentional. And that's even why the name Slumberkins exists for us. It's like the moment to really connect with your child, and make that a really almost like a ritual that is a skill building moment and a connected moment for you and your child.
I love that. And I did see something the other day about like habits and also like motivation versus habits and like whether or not we're going to do something. And if you make that a part of your routine, it becomes habit, then it's not as hard to do, right? Because now it's just second nature. It's something that like our coping mechanisms that just come out because it's almost second nature. You can turn these things into that second nature. So I love that because that's so simple and you can do it right before bed. And I love that. With the specific emotions or challenges that you think parents, or what are the most specific emotions or challenges that you think parents should be most mindful of?
We get our most popular creature is Hammerhead because of the tantrums, big feelings, big emotions, coming out in the form of anger outbursts or meltdowns. And the worst time to try to teach a child emotion regulation and how to tame their tantrum is in the middle of a tantrum, as you know. So this is where the proactive ritual approach. So then the kids know already the story, the affirmation, the practice, the routine to be able to lean on in those moments. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of it's conflict resolution, Hammerhead, as well as another of our really popular characters is actually Unicorn, that really helps promote authenticity, and really cultivate that open conversation around just being loved for exactly who you are and being free and accepted, and the emotional safety, within that parent-child relationship is so important to proactively cultivate.
And I think too, just to add to this, which I think it's been a theme through our whole conversation, is just that you as a parent are not separate from your child's emotional health and wellness. And so if they are having a tantrum, it becomes very easy to just only focus on them and what you're going to do to try to stop that or control that or change that. And I would encourage everybody to, like Kaylee said, it's not necessarily the moment where you need to spring into action as much as you need to turn the mirror back to yourself and regulate yourself. Many times, if you are just in the presence of a child that's having a tantrum, if your system is getting triggered and you're like, ugh, that's going to amplify it. So just breathing like you were doing in the classroom, taking your breaths, calming down, narrating that of like how you're doing that just in their presence. Or if you have to be in a room because they're being too wild. I had to do this with my son all the time. and I would just sit in the corner. He would be tearing apart his room, and I would be breathing in the corner and telling myself, it's okay. I'm safe. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to keep myself safe. We're going to breathe and calm down. And eventually they come down to a state of calm. And then later you can talk about like consequences or, expectations. But in that moment, it's about co-regulation. And if you are not regulated, you need to work on regulating yourself so you can lend that to them. They do not have access to it. Kids' brains and the like regulation piece, it doesn't even fully form until like 25. So like just get used to it because you're going to be having to do it a lot.
100%. Reading and writing are the cornerstones of your child's education. Without the right foundation, they can struggle. But with the right tools, they can soar. That's where the 5 Foundations of Reading e-course comes in. This course is designed to teach parents how to help their children master phonological awareness, which is the essential first step in literacy, phonics skills like decoding spelling patterns for fluent reading and writing, segmenting and blending, which are key strategies for becoming a confident reader, and orthographic mapping so that your child can learn spelling patterns and use them effectively. Last, you'll learn about high-frequency words, which are essential for fluency in everyday reading. You'll also learn the most effective ways to teach these skills, making learning time productive and enjoyable for both you and your child. Whether your child is ahead or catching up, this course equips you to support their journey to literacy success. Start today by visiting k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below. And I think that's like, honestly, that was probably the hardest part for me as an educator, was having to be that regulation all day. And I can only imagine, like, it's 1,000 times amplified when it's your own child. And because there's just like, the emotion, like, I feel like you can feel your child's emotions stronger. I don't know how to, you guys probably understand what I'm saying, but like, you just feel it harder and stronger. And so being that regulatory person, I think that's going to be the hardest piece, but it's the most simple piece, right? Because if you have the skills, your child is, going to subconsciously also kind of pick up on that as well. That like, oh, when, there's a lot going on and I'm feeling overwhelmed, like I can sit down, I can breathe, I can whatever. And, bringing them
safe environment. It's not going to amplify to me, which,
yes,
that was what happened in my family system before. So I'm kind of cycle breaking in this. And actually the first book in Hammerhead's collection is called Mad's Not Bad, because my son would have huge emotional outbursts. To me, that signaled like things are unsafe and I need to get louder to like control it, And I started doing this even when he was a little, like I was like, why am I like trying to fight with my freaking 2-year-old here? Like we're in a yelling match and I'm like, this is crazy. And I realized it was more about my own triggers and like my own past experience. And I never got that like safe regulation from my family. And so I just got sent to my room, right? And then locked something away in me. So his anger was triggering me. And actually what is really beautiful and is you have the opportunity as a parent in that moment then to heal yourself. You're healing yourself through giving that gift to your child. And that feels really powerful. And that's like that whole cycle breaking thing. And, we try to give access points to those cycle breaking tools through every single one of our characters, to where like, if you resonate with one of those affirmations, it's probably because you have a little thing in there that maybe needs some healing. And you have the opportunity to do that in connection with your child and give them the gift of, having those skills from childhood, which, gosh, how would my life be different if that, I didn't have those reactions and triggers that cause me to just spin out in the ways that I do. And I'm hopeful that my kids will have those gifts. And I'm real excited to see, how they use them.
I love that. So before we, tell everyone where we can find you, which I will also put the links down below because I want it to be simple for my listeners so they can just go down and click the link. But I will have you guys kind of go over like where they can find you. But before we do that, I just want to ask you guys one more question. If you could leave parents with one message about raising emotionally healthy kids, what would it be?
You've got this. Like really, it's just it's so much work personally as the parent to raise emotionally healthy kids in your own emotional wellness journey. And it's hard. That journey is not like just a growth journey. It is like, it looks like this most days. So just knowing that it's hard, but it's so worth it. And also don't be afraid to ask for help. I reached out and went to family therapy with my daughter because I recognized like we needed support, and there is no shame in that. And being able to cultivate like community and support for yourself along the way is so important.
I
I
love
would say
that.
there's no end point, right? There's always going to be, just expect that there's always going to be amazing good times, and there's always going to be hard times and stressful times. That's part of life. There is the illusion that we're going to have some perfect, stable, always the same thing. Like that's not healthy, actually. Systems are meant to change, to grow, to leave space. Kids are developing all of the time. Like you just are never going to hit that point where there's nothing going on. So just expect and know that even emotions that are hard to hold have important messages for you and for your child. And if you can leave space for those and understand and be curious about it and learn together, that is emotional health, right? Rigidity, closed offness, holding things just to stay the same is not a sign of health. Health is like growth and movement and change. And that's not always comfortable, but, always we look back and say, okay, like you can look back fondly on your really tough year and like all the gifts it gave you. It's not always fun in the moment, but it's worth it.
100%. And it just teaches you so much about yourself. Like you guys were saying, like even just other people's kids would teach me about myself. And I was like, whoa, I have some serious triggers that I need to work on. And then obviously I'm going to learn that with my kids and my sisters. They have, multiple kids, and they always tell me, their oldest are 10, about to be 11. And they've told me, they're like, honestly, like, it doesn't matter what you learned with like that kid, like it's totally different on the next kid, and then every phase is like totally different, and it's just like you said, you're never going to have like this like perfect linear learning experience, and you're not going to know exactly what to do with each kid. It's going to change over time, and like it's just, so I love that. And I love that you guys just said like community, having somebody to help, ask for help, and to like that you can do this, and tomorrow's a new day, or it's 10 a.m. the rest of the day is a new day. We can just start fresh. It's fine. It was a bad first 5 hours. We're good now.
Clear your first block. Clear your
Yes.
first block like you did for your student, and now it's a fresh new start.
Yes, I can do it with other people, with other kids, but then when it comes to myself, I'm really bad at it. Like I was like, we don't need to be perfect, and then I'm like striving for perfection. So it's like you said, like it's something that you always have to work on. So I love that. But where can people find you, and where can they find Slumberkins?
Well, they can find Slumberkins on slumberkins.com. And then we build community both on Instagram, Slumberkins on Instagram, TikTok, and then on Facebook. And then on Facebook, we have a Slumberkins social Facebook group. And that's where we cultivate a lot of conversations. Kelly and I moderated ourselves. So lots of different like questions come through from parents on the emotional like strategies and or tips for using Slumberkins or even without Slumberkins. But come join us in the Slumberkin Social, because it's we think, the best parenting group out there on Facebook.
Supportive group of people.
Yeah.
I love that. I will be looking at this Facebook group as I go through motherhood and parenthood, because I know I'm going to need it, and I'm going to need a community of people that are like also like-minded, and then also just that have like, you guys have such a wealth of knowledge. And I think that is just helpful. Like you said, we can get bombarded with so many things on social media, like do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And so just having something that's kind of like cohesive with how you're feeling, and then also a framework that you can kind of work through that's not just tons of noise. So I love that so much. And I have loved this conversation with you guys. And I think that whether you're a parent or an educator, you are going to get so much out of this conversation. And I'm just glad that you guys are out there doing this work, because it is so needed, especially in today's world.
Thank you for having us. been great.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an update. Literacy is the foundation of learning, and every child deserves the tools to succeed. If you're ready to take the next step in your child's education, check out my website at k3homeschoolfoundations.com for resources, curriculum, and support to make literacy simple and effective.